Brenden, appreciate the time. We'll start with this. The Cardinals last night got the victory coming from behind. Dylan Carlson led the way. It wasn't pretty, but hey, a win's a win. What'd you take away from last night, and how important was that success from Dylan Carlson?
Yeah, to see that from Carlson for really the first time all season, that could be something that really gets him going. I know Ollie Marmol hopes it. I know the Cardinals hope it. Because, look, in spring training, he was really coming around and then had that fluke collision with Jordan Walker in the outfield right before the season began. And then I think when they brought him back, it was maybe a tad too early. He may have still been a little bit banged up and trying to come back and feel good from that. And the momentum that he had was just completely gone. And I think Dylan Carlson's a big-time confidence player, and maybe last night something that can give him a little bit of confidence. We'll see if Ollie Marmol finds ways to keep him in the lineup and see if they can keep that rolling. But just generally speaking, this series against the Rockies is one the Cardinals really do need to win when you just consider the records of the two teams. They'd come off that road trip where the Cardinals kind of held serve at a 4-5 record, and now you play some teams a little lower in the standings. After losing Game 1, last night was important. The offense got it going, and despite the starting pitching not getting very deep with Lance Lynn, the bullpen held up, and the Cardinals were able to get one. We'll see if they can keep that rolling this afternoon.
Brenden, look, I mean, you've probably seen this team play, as much as anybody. I imagine you haven't missed a game. Like, when you kind of assess this team at this point in June, are you kind of looking at it as they're a team that's, a good team just had some bad luck, an average team with not good luck, or kind of what's your assessment of where this team's at right now?
Yeah, I think they're probably somewhere in the middle. You look at that National League wild card race, and there are two teams that are in playoff spots, but they're not above 500. And then there's a whole slew of teams nipping at their heels, and I think all those teams are kind of in the middle. None of them are really too good. I don't think any of them are terrible. And, the next 100 games or so is going to parse out really what we think of these teams. But in the case of the Cardinals, I think they've got some solid pieces. I do think if this team is going to be destined to make a run, you'll have to see John Mozeliak in his front office probably fill in some of the gaps, some of the holes. Number 5 starter could really be an issue if you're talking a 162-game season. The Cardinals may need to find an outside option there. And then just making sure you're staying on top of the bullpen options. They're looking really good over the llast couple of days, but I still think you might want a veteran righty to pick up around the trade deadline or any time before that to really reinforce that unit. There have been a number of right-handers that the Cardinals thought they would have, and they're all on the injured list right now. Gallegos, Riley O'Brien, Nick Robertson, and obviously Keenan Middleton out for the season. So I think if this team's going to really go from kind of average in the middle to being a truly good team, the front office may need to continue investing in it as time goes on.
Brenden, I did a little research and because I was curious, and just I know that baseball has changed and they've done a lot of different things, moved away from some of the way they view pitching in the past. But the starting pitching staff for the Cardinals, 17th out of 30 teams in quality starts. They have 21. Only 4 times a starter has thrown over 100 pitches this year for a Cardinals starter. Only 4 times have a pitcher completed 7 innings. So are you concerned with the lack of innings, how that maybe could affect the bullpen? How much does that concern you so far this year?
Well, it's interesting because the narrative all off season from the Cardinal front office was about how they needed to pick up innings eaters and have guys that could provide that for the team. And if you look at across baseball right now and sort the statistical page by innings pitched, it's just that the starters are not doing what you thought they would do or what it was seeming that John Mozeliak and company were going to ask them to do. Cardinal starters rank 23rd in innings pitched. So that's just an element that I think is a little bit of a disappointment, but they, to the credit of most of the guys in this rotation, outside of Steven Matz, they have had guys who've been durable so far and have taken the ball, and they've not had to dip too deep into their rotation depth, which I don't think is very strong, and I don't think the organization thinks it's very strong. So, that's an aspect of it. And then you think about the bullpen. Yeah, I mean, with all the injuries they've had to the bullpen, they've relied pretty heavily on just a select few guys who have done a nice job at the back end. But is that going to be sustainable in July, August, September if you continue to ask as much of those guys? The one thing I will say about burning out the bullpen, if you look at just pitches thrown by some of the main relievers like Romero and Kittredge and Helsley, those guys aren't really at the tippy top of the league in terms of being the most worked. It kind of feels like we see them a lot, but I do think there's an aspect of, man, as long as those guys are on your team doing a nice job, they are there to pitch. So I think we sometimes make too much of the notion that you can burn out the bullpen, but it is something you have to monitor if guys are going to continue, as we've seen, especially recently with these 4- and 5-inning starts. That's going to probably catch up to the Cardinals eventually.
I can't believe that this is a question that I'm asking at this point, considering how the year started, but the Cardinals defense has now committed the 9th most errors in baseball, 25 in the last 21 games. This seemingly, Brenden, kind of came out of nowhere because to start the year, it seemed like maybe they had fixed some of those defensive woes, and then all of a sudden here in the last month and a half, things have taken a turn. Have you seen anything in particular that's jumped out at you, or is it just, kind of just how baseball rolls sometimes?
Man, I don't know. It's kind of inexplicable. I mean, even in last night's game, saw Goldschmidt just drop a pop-up in foul territory. That one didn't come back to haunt the Cardinals, but just some of those fundamental plays that you expect to be sort of automatic. It's not like you're talking about, they've got Jordan Walker out there and he's still learning the position. Like, these errors are coming from guys who have been there and done that. Mason Wynn's a rookie, obviously, but and so he's made a number of errors, but he also makes some great defensive plays. So I think you can kind of take the good with the bad, but you do want to see things sharpened up, because I don't think the Cardinals have the elite offense the way it's performing now, or the elite pitching staff to be able to say, we've got a margin for error that when we give up defensive errors, it's not going to be the end of the world because we've got other aspects of our team that can overcome that. No, I think the Cardinals have got to be a very clean baseball team and play crisp ball if they're going to be able to succeed, because they just don't have that Phillies lineup that's going to outslug everybody. It'd be nice if they did, if those guys want to perform to a higher degree than they have so far. But when you're talking about just kind of trying to get by and skirt by in these 2-run and 1-run wins, for the Cardinals, I think you're going to have to be able to have crisp defense as a part of that. And even guys like Arenado have been really, really rough in the early going. So we'll see if that's something that can come around. But you're right; it has been something that we can't deny it. We can't sit here and go, that's very uncharacteristic. It's not really. This year, it's not been. That's been part of what this team has been, especially in recent weeks, as you mentioned.
I wanted to ask you. You mentioned Mason Winn. You were around, obviously, last year when he got called up late in the season, and then to start of this year. Have you seen a big difference with him, or is it just the fact that he's more comfortable, he's got that major league experience under his belt? Because I feel like he's been just terrific this year for the Cardinals.
Yeah, he's been unbelievable, and I think it was a great decision by the team late last year to give him that cup of coffee, and they even kind of scheduled it to ensure that he would still have Rookie of the Year eligibility. He wouldn't have too many at-bats to where he wouldn't qualify in 2024. And people probably saw his batting line last year and said, well, he's hitting 150 or whatever it is. What are we worried about Rookie of the Year? He's not going to be a candidate for that. But Mason Winn, as he has graduated throughout the system, kind of does this. He will graduate to a new level. He'll struggle for a spell, and then he'll really kind of find his bearings. And boy, has he ever found his bearings. He looks like a Rookie of the Year candidate right now, and the guy just keeps hitting. I like that Ollie Marmol has been willing to move him up in the batting order, because he has been just electric for this Cardinals team, offensively and defensively.
The big talk, too, with Mason Winn all year has been the scheduled off days, and a lot's been made about it. But when he's going like this, it's kind of hard to argue with giving him a day off or 1 or 2 days off a week, because it seems to be working for him.
Yeah, the thing that you don't want is he's been managing that back issue ever since spring. Remember, there was a few days in spring where he was just kind of MIA, and the Cardinals said, he's got a back thing he's dealing with. And then they signed Brandon Crawford shortly thereafter. So they're trying to manage it to where they don't have to put Mason Winn on the IL at any point, right? You want to make sure to keep that guy available to you. I think we notice it a little bit less if Brandon Crawford starts to perform a little better, as he's had a couple of decent starts where he's contributed offensively in recent weeks. So I think it is a system that people don't like. People maybe didn't understand at first, but some of those things that happen to these guys behind the scenes we're not really too keen on. But if Mason Wynn's been going through it all year with the back, that's something you just have to manage. And I think the players and Ollie Marmol, they have a good working relationship where they're able to kind of talk about those things and make sure everybody's on the same page. So, I don't really think that's something that at this point we should be too concerned about if they're managing it appropriately and he's still getting the production that he's bringing to the Cardinals.
Brenden, we'll wrap it up with this. Look, this is a stretch right now. They got a few games here at home. They're playing some teams under 500. So really in the month of June, the toughest opponent they have a 3-game series with the Braves. But everyone else, I think you have winnable series. So this is a time, in my opinion, and Clay and I talked about this, that, look, Cardinals got to take advantage of it. This is some time to maybe make up some ground a little bit. And if they can find a way to get to that 500 mark, get ahead of it a little bit, that can be where they can kind of, breathe a little bit as we go on the rest of the year.
Yeah, this is the time to make moves, and that's why I said, look, you lose game 1 to the Rockies, you lose the Sonny Gray game. That was unfortunate, but it's not really an excuse to say, well, maybe we can just split this series by taking 2 of the final 3. You've got to. I think you got to beat the Rockies. When I look at this homestand between the games against Colorado and Pittsburgh, 5 out of 7 should kind of be the expectation. And then moving on from that, yeah, you'll have to go to Wrigley later on this month, and there'll be some tough games in there with the Braves eventually. But I think about the you go to the Marlins, like you play the Giants, who are a little bit below 500, just like you are. This will be a proving ground for the Cardinals when July 1st hits. If this team is still kind of scuffling a couple of games below 500, it'll be fair to wonder at that point, like, well, if it wasn't this month that brought them, back into relevance, when is it going to happen?
Yeah.
And hopefully for the Cardinals, it can be right here.
All right, Brenden Schaeffer, again, thanks so much for the time this morning. Clay and I much appreciated.
All good, fellas. Thanks for having me.
All right, take care, man.